We are live. This is the Market Update. I am your host, Bill Noble. If you need a roadmap in crypto, subscribe to this channel. Turn on alerts so you know when we're going live. And if the content works for you, don't forget to hit the like button. All right. I am still not feeling good, but we are going to pound it out today. So you're going to get your crypto dose for the weekend. Carmenko, Bohemian Ape, Yav, Tyler Hall, Blown Ideas. Welcome to the show. Thank you. Yes, I'm trying to get better here. Warmon, Tooth, Miguel, and Crypto Scam. Ladies and gentlemen, what's happening? Okay. Let's get news going. The hated rally. These guys in stocks are so twisted around. They thought it was the end of the world, and it wasn't. And the hated rally means they were bearish. It rallied. Now they have to turn themselves around, which is why I don't get short, or I try not to be bearish unless I think it's really going to be an FTX or a disaster. Because once you get spun around, once you miss the low, it's hard. Goldman says, I've been negative, but now I'm bullish. Time to start scaling in. You know, they didn't want it when it was down, but when it's up, it's much more attractive. I mean, it's really incredible. Fast food giant Steak and Shake is now officially accepting Bitcoin on the Lightning Payment Network. They're going to get it on their balance sheet no matter what. Eric Trump says it's a race to the top to accumulate as much Bitcoin as possible. You know, I think with these guys in these conferences, like the Bitcoin conference, they have to come up with something or they're going to sell the market. Right? In other words, it's okay for Eric Trump to come out and say something, but if JD Vance doesn't have a plan, you know, they could sell the market. Now, this is funny, right? When your currency fails, you go to Bitcoin. That's really kind of funny. One of the things that, and we'll go into Arthur Hayes' piece later, but when you have imbalance in the U.S. economy and you have what they're going to need to do, which is effectively devalue the dollar, we'll get into that later. But if your currency doesn't work, you got to go with Bitcoin. 10 reasons why Goldman's trading desk is quietly buying. $1 in stocks is better than $1 in the bank. If you're holding cash, that dollar is going to fall versus Bitcoin and potentially other currencies, because as we'll go through with Arthur Hayes, you know, instead of tariffs, they may do something with what are called capital controls. So if there's money invested in the United States, they may do something that say, yeah, you guys have to pay us 2% to be invested here, which could result in asset selling, right? Asset selling, you know, which would lower the dollar, right? You sell your stocks, you sell your bonds or whatever it is, and then you sell the dollar and go back to your home currency. It's a very powerful thing because it's more powerful than tariffs. Riding the rally that no one believes in. Here's S&P. It's hard to believe this drop came back straight up. I mean, the number of people who got screwed up down here was staggering. Powell signals Fed policy shift with framework under review. I mean, when you look at the inflation numbers, it's absolutely unbelievable. Interest rates are so high, they have to offer tax deductions on interest rates in order to get buyers into the market. It's absolutely incredible. I've been negative, but now I'm bullish, says Goldman. Despite production declines, there were sizable builds in private and public oil stocks, while gasoline stocks fell. They have got to get off this regulation from Brandon as fast as they can. Losses at the Federal Reserve. They bought a lot of bonds when interest rates were low from QE, and then bond yields went higher. They're going to have to do QE to save themselves. It all started a call from a close friend in 2013. You really need to read the Bitcoin white paper. 5 years later, I founded Galaxy Digital, a huge hedge fund, and everyone laughed at him. They thought it was a joke. 1,300 days ago, we began the process to become a U.S. public company. Tomorrow, we're ringing the bell on NASDAQ. Good for Mike. You realize the U.S. publicly traded hedge fund had to go to Canada to get stock, to raise capital by issuing stock. Okay, a research house believes Galaxy Digital's flagship data center, so essentially they turned a giant data center, they turned a Bitcoin mine into a data center, will generate $1.7 billion in revenue. Right? Now, I would have preferred he kept the Bitcoin mine. Okay. But we also want the big crypto hedge fund to make money, to be the flagship, like the Goldman Sachs of crypto. Now, here's something interesting. A legacy newspaper called the Financial Times has now covered Bitcoin 400 times since 2018. Since 2023, the Fed ramped up its Bitcoin coverage, barely touching the topic outside of major crashes in 2018. Seems like they only showed up when Bitcoin was bleeding, until Tradfi started leaning in last year. You got to remember something. Tradfi just got here. They got a lot of work to do to catch up. A lot of work to do. Now, Coinbase gets hacked. I mean, I've been getting texts from Coinbase saying, just phishing attempts. We can't, your 2FA failed. Call us up and give you your 2FA, because that's the only thing that they don't have. It's unbelievable that these exchanges cannot stop cyber attacks. I'm assuming it's the North Koreans. Saudi Arabian central bank owns MicroStrategy. Now, there's a very important point here. Anybody who can't do Bitcoin is going to do MicroStrategy, no matter how expensive it is. No matter how expensive it is. It's fascinating, right? Because when you have a central bank owning Bitcoin, owning MicroStrategy, they're not selling it. They're not selling it. They bought it because they want Bitcoin exposure. Now they're talking at consensus, right? Kevin O'Leary says, I own HBAR. Fascinating, right? I think ETH and some of these layer ones are going up because there's going to be an announcement. It's either BlackRock, right? It could be, a big Web 2 company. Somebody's going to start running stable coins, or they're going to develop their own payment networks or security tokens on these layer ones. These layer ones are there. They built it and they will come. That was their attitude. Guess what? I think they're coming. And I think if it's the American-made cryptos, it makes an even bigger case for Hedera, Algorand, and even XRP because of XRP Ledger. Now, sometimes the market can bore you out. Sometimes it can get overbought. It is a little overbought. But you saw Solana get overbought and have it to mark 13 top. Lasted what? 2 days? Right? You get 1 and 2 day dips, and that's it. Right? And in the meantime, not only, you don't want them to let you get your crypto, but even if it corrects, you don't want to get discouraged. Like, look at this. Producer price index down 0.5%, expected to be up. Producer prices, including, energy, down 0.4%, expected to be up, right? The stock market debacle crushed inflation, which is why maybe they did it. Gold Palace's jet deals. The orange man is at home. Notice again, Doomberg, no tariff headlines. If they do capital controls, which is what Arthur Hayes said, right? The market could go much higher because the dollar could go much, much, much lower in that scenario. Now, I think, Americans save only 0.6% of their income. Okay. Now, why is that relevant? Because they're going to pour into crypto to try to make money. This is Ethereum. ETH is sitting on the 200-day moving average, and we've been going through this for a couple of days. ETH is 50% away from its premium zone. Do you realize it's possible for Bitcoin to sit at 102 and have these layer ones just smoke higher? Especially ETH, right? Especially ETH. And the one thing that I tell people about ETH, right, is that very few people realize that once ETH has gotten going in the past, it just smokes, right? I mean, when ETH consolidates, it's this little teeny tiny sideways range. And then when it goes, it's vertical. Okay. Here everybody is on the treadmill of life. Study for 20 years, work for 40, free for 5 to 10, die. It's a scam. You know who you're working for these days? Yourself. That's who you're working for. Especially when you're doing crypto. Crypto could save you from the end of this. Like, first the 60-40 portfolio ends. Then traditional, corporate employment ends or changes in some way. The case for crypto is so compelling. You can now develop a Charles Schwab attitude of ignore the noise. Here's the 13 top in Solana that everyone more or less ignored. And you're 1 day away from a 13 top in Bitcoin, but Bitcoin sits on top of this range. So if you have a sell signal and Bitcoin holds above the range, it can be a powerful move. or a powerful signal. And even if they wash out Bitcoin, right? If they wash out Bitcoin and they wash out the rest of the market, that represents an opportunity to get involved in AI. Even if all you know about AI is Tau, Fetch, ASI, Artificial Superintelligence Token, and Render. It's okay. Because you know what? In years like 2021, you did just fine with Bitcoin, Ethereum, and Solana. You did just fine. Now, I'm sure there will be some sexy new plays in AI, but the next AI trade is for real. And I know you've heard that before, and I'm going to keep saying it. I'm going to keep saying it because when Powell gets involved, Powell's got to do QE, right? Now, I'm not going to read the whole thing to you, but Arthur Hayes has a piece that's recently come out. Right? Hayes points out that altcoins like Pendle and Ether.fi, right, is having strong potential to real user demand and protocol profitability. In sum, U.S. capital controls and money printing will drive foreign capital out and weaken the dollar and push Bitcoin to new highs as the global financial system fragments and looks for new safe haven. Let's take a look at the dollar chart. Now, again, one reminder about the dollar chart. Is that, if you look at this, it's like, okay, there's Lux Algo resistance here, right? There's a big pennant, and it's at the top of the pennant. But if you go to a quarterly chart, right, this is the third time around for the dollar. Okay. 1985 over here. It's funny. I was pointing to the chart. 1985. This was an agreement by countries that the dollar had to go lower. This was an organic drop in the dollar off a recession. Okay. They were tightening to stop the dot-com bubble. Then when they started cutting rates, the dollar fell out of bed. In this particular case, it was the Mar-a-Lago Accord, where he wants dollar against Asian currencies to go lower, because that's how you make U.S. goods cheaper abroad. And even if those goods are made by robots 5 to 10 years from now, he wants the dollar lower now, right? And they're going to switch from tariffs to taxing any foreign investment here, which will chase them out and get the dollar lower. Not obviously, but if they want the dollar lower, the fastest way to get the dollar lower is to have the dollar fall in value versus Bitcoin. In other words, have crypto rally. And this is the macro component that everyone is forgetting about. It's QE and a lot lower dollar. And they are going to have to do QE because they're going to have to save the U.S. bond market. The case for AI in crypto is compelling. The case for DeFi is compelling. Aave is a profitable business. So is Pendle, as Arthur Hayes has pointed out. And I'm looking at Syrup, used to be Maple, on Coinbase. Once Coinbase figures out how to secure your data, there is a lot of stuff on Coinbase that is really, really worth looking at. Okay. I appreciate your understanding on the fact that I'm seriously under the weather, but you have your marching orders. We will see you on Monday.